I feel like hometowns always have a weird vibe. Awkward, embarrassing stories, weird interactions, and that really strange guy from your high school that you keep seeing everywhere you go.
What?
They can be incredibly hard to leave, but it might just be the best decision you'll ever make. My name is Cyrus. I'm a full-time filmmaker and photographer based out of Chicago. And I grew up and spent my entire life in Sarasota, Florida, up until February of last year, where I got connected with my friend Eric Floberg, and I'd visited the city a couple times before fully making the transition over to Chicago. And look, I'm not saying that everyone needs to leave their hometown. There's plenty of people where they're perfectly fine where they are, and that's okay. But I'm assuming that if you clicked on this video, you're interested in the idea, and so I'm going to give you some reasons why I made the move. Compared to Chicago, Florida was not really filled with a bunch of creative people, and it was one of those situations where you find yourself constantly in the same routine, hanging around with the same people, and I needed a change. I was feeling super uninspired creatively. And at that point, most of my work I was traveling for anyways. And I just kept watching people online that were making super cool things. And I was trying to do the same, but it just wasn't the same. Florida was isolating for me. And many people go through this stage of life, call it the lonely chapter. Chris Williamson came up with this idea where anyone that goes on a personal growth journey, there comes a point in time where you've outgrown the people that you've been around for all this time, but you're not necessarily around the people that you need to be to grow into that next version of yourself. My biggest inspirations at the time were people online. It wasn't people in my personal life. It was people like Eric, people like Danny Gevirtz that I was watching on YouTube. And at that point, I felt more connected to them on a personal level than I did some of the people that were physically around me. And when I was in that position, I knew that after I had connected with Eric and been offered an opportunity to move out here, I couldn't say no. At this point, I was already fairly emotionally distant from my hometown, and physically moving just made that official. This isn't to say that your hometown friends are just some scum that you can't hang out with anymore, but rather that there's a time and a place for everyone. There's certain people that you keep in your life no matter what, but I knew that I needed a change of environment, a change of community, and a change of location. A change in perspective is always a good thing. Sarasota is a beautiful location just south of Tampa, on the water, beautiful beaches, but it did become the same thing every week, day in and day out. And even as a creative, it's hard to find new ideas and new things to shoot when you're constantly surrounded by the same environment. So moving myself across the country did that for me. It gave me a whole new perspective. The Midwest is its own completely different world, but being in a big city like Chicago has completely changed my mindset, completely changed how I even see Florida. I didn't realize quite how slow the pace of life was there. And sometimes I miss it. Sometimes I am looking forward to my trips back. But being able to have that perspective has allowed me to appreciate some of the things that I took for granted. Coming from a Florida boy, experiencing a true winter like in Chicago was very eye-opening. It's a completely different world. You never see the types of things that I saw here in the winter, where barely anyone is outside and there's this sense of waiting for the summer. Everyone's got their head down. They're grinding through the winter. It's a slower season of work. Like in Florida, there's no such thing as slower seasons of work because it's all the same. There's an argument to be made that's even busier in the winter when there's snowbirds down, but you can only benefit from having an array of perspectives. I stepped into a community that had already been built of like-minded creatives that were much further along in their creative entrepreneurship than I was. And to step into that space, surrounded by people that I was very inspired by and had looked up to online for years, it was unlike any other imposter syndrome I'd ever experienced before. But let me tell you, a rising tide raises all ships. And just being around these people, you learn so much faster than you could learn by yourself. Suddenly, a year later, I find myself in a position that I could have only dreamed of. Especially for young adults, moving out of your hometown is something that is only going to get more and more difficult the later you get into life. I apply this perspective to a lot of things in my life, but I definitely applied it to moving to Chicago because yes, there's an argument to be made that, oh, my situation, it was not easy to make that move. I had my family in Florida, I had my girlfriend in Florida, but it's only going to get harder. If you can immerse yourself in a completely new community, I think you will look back fondly on this phase of life. And trust me, it wasn't easy for me. So my girlfriend Molly, she lives in Florida still, and I had to make this decision to move across the country and put ourselves into a long distance relationship. And I'm sure that there's plenty of people out there that will criticize that decision, but we were just over a year into our relationship and I knew that she was the one. And at that point, I already felt very confident in our relationship and our future. And I knew that this move would completely change the course of my career. And I explained to her that this move and this opportunity was everything I had ever dreamed of, and that it would benefit both of us in the long run. And obviously, it's not ideal. It hasn't been the most fun all the time to be this far apart from each other. But like I said earlier, if not now, when? When is there going to be a better time in my life to do this? When is there going to be a better time to pack up everything, chase a dream, and move across the country? When I did that at 20 years old, there was very little responsibility holding me back from being able to make that type of decision. I can only imagine trying to make that kind of decision at 30. It's much more difficult. There's a lot more life that goes on, a lot more responsibility that you have to deal with. So all that to say that in your early 20s, fresh out of college or even high school, depending on which route you take, now's the time to do it. I want to be clear too, I'm definitely not saying that you need to leave your hometown and just kiss it goodbye, never look back, put the blinders on. No, I've actually come to enjoy my hometown a lot more now that I left and have the perspective that I have. And I have a feeling that there's going to be a time in my life where I end up going back, whether that's to raise a family or to be closer to my mom and brother in the future. But either way, you can leave for a period of time and come back, and that's perfectly okay. Like I said, that's probably something that I will do. But to come back does not mean that you failed or that this was some waste of time. It's like the book The Alchemist. Santiago goes on this journey, this mission to find treasure. And along the way, he's met by people that have a very important factor in shaping his mind and how he sees the world. And along the way, he's learning, he's growing, and it ends up that he finds his treasure where he originally started, in the backyard. All of that to say that you can leave and come back, and that's not the same thing as never leaving. It's about what you learn along the way. For me personally, I felt like there was no work in Florida. I felt like I was in a world of my own, that I had to travel for anything to make any money. And I left, I moved to Chicago. I've learned a lot of skills in the business world and have been able to actually apply it to my work back in Florida whenever I go back to visit. And it makes me confident in knowing that by taking this jump and moving across the country to Chicago, I at least know that it was good for me to learn everything that I have in business, and I could go and apply it to a new location or to my hometown if I go back. Especially in your younger years, going out, exploring, putting yourself in new situations, new experiences, new people can only benefit your life. So I hope that this gave you at least a little bit of a nudge to explore your options. And I'm curious to know, anyone that's watching that is considering leaving their hometown, what is holding you back? Because I've been there. I have passed up on certain opportunities because I didn't want to leave. And eventually I got to a point where I just couldn't do it anymore. So I'm curious, what is holding you back? I'd love to start a conversation in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.